what is this team bringing for UCLA back in 2025? There's expectations, there's portal projections, and then there's the class of 2025. Let's start with the class of 2025. UCLA has nobody signed in the class of 25. That is something that is rather unique, that Mick Cronin did not sign anybody in the class of 25. He had somebody signed super early in last year's class, Eric Franey, and he was told to redshirt. But in the class of 25, UCLA has just not hit on any recruits. They lost one they thought they had in their own backyard. In Nick Kamenia, there's been some big names that have gone elsewhere. The biggest uncommitted guys are Braden Burries, basically in UCLA's own backyard, and Koa Pete. And now some of those are top-notch, high-end, 4-star, 5-star players. And is it really fair to say that guys that are cool on the UCLA recruiting efforts, or maybe committing, regardless of when this podcast was recorded, those are the guys that I just checked, uncommitted at the time I looked. It's not likely that those guys are coming. Burries is a target for UCLA. He's going through his high school playoff run. Last year, the Bruins in the class of 24 got a steal getting Trent Perry late. And even then, you see how many minutes he's getting, how many minutes Eric Freeney's getting. How does that make UCLA a desirable location for current 2025 recruits? Well, the Bruins, heading into this next 2025-2026 year, are going to lose Kobe Johnson and then Lazar Stefanovic to graduation. All right, those guys are out of eligibility. They didn't go play JUCO ball. They're not going to sue, make it a Diego Pavia rule. I don't think the NCAA is going to turn it into a 5-year thing next year where they're going to sue and come back. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Anything weird, they're going to lose the starting 3, right? Their starting 3 guard, which is Johnson and the backup and a guy who could start elsewhere in Stefanovic. Okay, so the ideal candidate, you get a guy who could be a small forward, like a P to a 6'8". Braden Burry's undersized for what Johnson is, but can maybe fit in nicely. And you're like, okay, is it bad that UCLA doesn't have a commit signed? Optically, given the illusion to the fan base that we're doing nothing, is not entirely true. Remember, UCLA can bring everybody back but Johnson and Stefanovic. That means Sky Clark, another year. William Kyle, another year. Adham Mara, another 2 years. Okay. And we're like, Bilodeau, another year. You're like, oh, this is interesting. Dylan Andrews, another year. And you're getting guys that are starting to build senior campaigns. Trent Perry, who in my mind, along with some of these other guys, could be candidates to transfer. In my mind, these are who you could come back with. Dylan Andrews, Sebastian Mack, who I think we all want to see be a 4-year Bruin, at least a 3-year Bruin, mixed with Sky Clark, be a 2-year Bruin. All those other transfers into this year, be 2 to 3 year Bruins. But where the transfers and who could UCLA lose out on, Trent Perry, who hasn't been utilized, right? Now, can he come back and improve? Certainly. But some guys don't like being used rarely, seldomly. And that's where Trent Perry's roles become. Cronin even said it in the post-game presser recently. We need more Trent Perry minutes. Well, why don't you give them to him? He's bigger. He's faster. He's bigger than some of the guards and probably plays sometimes in his best moments a little wiser with more dynamic potential. At this moment, he hasn't cracked the starting lineup. And if you don't like the Cronin method, then they're usually out right away. So Perry is an obvious target for potentially transferring out. And that's not rumblings I'm hearing. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But anytime you've got a true freshman after last year's true freshman class all mostly left, he has got to be in that name for, okay, it could happen. Just like any of these guys, it could happen. Daly Jr., Bilodeau, any of these guys, it could literally happen. That's what makes the portal a blessing and a curse. Somebody throws a little more money, you get more opportunities elsewhere. That's why any of these incoming guys, even if you brought them in now, you're not going to keep them potentially for another year. 2, Dominic Harris, a name we've forgotten about. He was a key get coming from LMU. 14 points per game, a third best 3-point shooter in the country was Dominic Harris. Nowhere to be found on this year's team. Hasn't really panned out for him. I would think if he has the credits, he finds the opportunity, he's going to bounce back to a Mountain West team, mid-major program, maybe a team in a lower level part of these super conferences. And Dominic Harris, unless we get a surprising turnaround, he would be a key candidate to also be leaving for UCLA and going to the portal. The guys who have redshirted, Eric Franey, Brandon Williams, Devin Williams. Cronin was talking about them in his presser, saying Devin Williams has dealt with a little bit of an injury, been sick, that Brandon Williams, similar thing, and that Eric Franey's been the healthiest and been getting a lot of run at practice, all right? So any of these guys, say Brandon Williams, get a little more athletic, he can maybe fit as the oversized 3, but if you bring back both Daly Jr. and Bilodeau, do you want those guys in the lineup? Devin Williams, well, that adds another big to UCLA's repertoire. You mix in Eric Franey, another guard. Is Cronin expecting one or two of these guys to leave, or is this just a backup plan where he's like, you guys didn't develop in your year of training, but you also didn't blow a year of eligibility, right? That's the blessing and the curse. Did you spend a year getting an academic education for a year or two at UCLA, but limited playing time? Also some NIL potential? Certainly. So those are the guys, even though they're redshirting and they're staying, you never know. It's like, hey, you sat there, you got through the UCLA strength and conditioning program, you learned how to play defense probably a lot better than if you were anywhere else other than the Mick Cronin intense defensive workout. Those are guys who could possibly leave. So the lack of the recruits, it's concerning, although I think UCLA's gap next year isn't going to be the center position. It's going to be the 3. And some of the guys out there could fill that role, either oversized or undersized. And with them having 3 current players who could redshirt, or are redshirting and could come back next year, any one of them could play a different role, which shifts the lineup into either a super big or a super small lineup. Because the Bruins could go back with Dylan Andrews, Sky Clark, you move Daly to the 3, you move Bilodeau to the 4, flip-flop, and then Mata to the 5. And that's how you roll. Or maybe you bring Sebastian Mack as the 3, or you shift one of those guys out to the 3. Go heavy guard. You mix in with the 4s, Bilodeau and Daly Jr. And then next thing you know, with Mata and Kyle, this is still a lineup that I think is good. After a year playing together, would have some similar expectations to what UCLA had after they brought all those guys back up to the Final Four, right? You brought a lot of these players back. After a year or two, they had big expectations and eventually won the Pac-12 conference. UCLA now in the Big Ten, if they go on a run in March, if they do, the expectations will be sky high in 2025 to 2026. There's already an expectation of improvement from last year's team to this year's team, and there has been. And there have been some highest of highs and some lowest of lows. Still a lot of youngsters, new guys on the block coming in, where Cronin doesn't believe his team has reached its full potential. But if you're clutch, you lean on and rest on your principles of playing tough-minded Cronin defense, make some shots, make some free throws. And as Cronin says, if they turn it over 5 times or less, 3 times or less, they'll be cutting down the nets. They will be cutting down the nets. So clean basketball in these next couple of weeks are crucial for UCLA's NCAA tournament hopes and what they're going to look like recruiting. Because if it goes bad in their first round bounce, then they're going to pick up their class of 25 recruiting via the portal, unlikely, or maybe last-ditch efforts to get a late signee, just how they got Trent Perry, the McDonald's All-American, to come to UCLA. Concerning that they have no commits from the high school ranks? Yes. But do expect UCLA to get a big 2026 or 2 2026 5-star, 4-star commits. That is where Cronin will try and make his mark into recruiting, because you're going to lose some of these guys. You need to refill the roster, or next year, they just don't need to do it as much. The turnover from last year to this year was significant, forcing him to go shopping, and he got the money he needed, right? He got the allowance, the NIL money, the NIL opportunities is really how it should be said. This next year, doesn't need to do it. They already have what they need to build to be a complete, more than complete Big Ten contender. Although some of you might disagree with what's coming back. Are they good enough? I think they're better than good enough with what they're bringing back, potentially. That doesn't mean everybody's going to stay and everybody's not going to leave. That would be absolutely crazy to think that they're all going to stay. But at this moment, UCLA has a plan and a reason, and it shouldn't be as concerning that they don't have a current class of 25 high school commit. If the same trend happens into 2026, though, then we got to ask Cronin, what are you doing here? For now, got to rule on the Bruins for a deep March Madness run. And that can help their future a lot.